Hi, this is Father Greg, and thanks for watching this video regarding the pandemic and COVID-19, and hopefully it's helpful for you. And thank you to the doctors who help with this. So as you may or may not know, I'm a man of faith, but also a man of science. Long ago, I was an engineer, and as we approach this pandemic, I think we need both approaches. To definitely listen to the science and be safe. Also, to still practice our faith, and I believe in the both and, to do both of them. So we do have an obligation to protect the least, the most vulnerable, really to protect each other, because we're called to love. The vision we should have in this is really that of love. What is love? It is doing the good of the other. What is good for the other? Not just my good. You know, my good would be I do whatever I want. But love is always to consider the other. And that's the big thing. Unfortunately, you never exactly know if you have the virus. You could be asymptomatic or it's just beginning in you. And we never know what we're sharing with others. That's why we need all the safety protocols with masks and distancing, because we are people of love. And really, there is a judgment on how we treated the least among us. I especially think of the most vulnerable. Here we have Jesus with the children, but also our seniors. Whatsoever you did for the least of my brothers, you did to me. So really we're doing this for Jesus, body and soul, to protect both of them. Another way I've been thinking about this, we'll see if this makes any sense, is persecution. The early church, the persecuting force was the Roman Empire, and Christians had to kind of scatter or go underground in the catacombs and be very careful. Today, our persecutor, in a way, is this virus. It's not persecuting the faith, but all of us, and it's a natural force. But one way to think about it is the last thing you'd want to do in a persecution is say, hey, Roman soldiers, come down to where all the Christians are at. They're having mass in this catacomb, and here they are, and bring that persecution on them. And this virus is a little bit like that. We got to be careful where we bring it. Hopefully we don't bring it anywhere or don't even get it. But we got to almost live as if we think it's on our tail. And that's why we got to be so very careful. We don't want to bring it to others. That's not love. So anyways, we do have this obligation to protect each other. Please listen to the other videos, consider, pray. Each of us do our parts. That way we can continue to practice our faith safely. I'd like to do more, but I'd also like to be even more safe for us all. So God bless you, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Broeckelman. I'm one of the local pediatricians and a Prince of Peace parishioner. My wife, Casey, teaches first grade here at Prince of Peace, and I have two boys that go here as well. Today we're just answering some of the pediatric related questions regarding COVID. So we'll start here. There was one about whether or not children are getting COVID. Is it accurate to say that they are getting COVID or spreading COVID? Or if they do get it, is it just more rare, or are they asymptomatic and therefore not really being tested as much? So children definitely get COVID-19. I've seen it firsthand in my office. Without a doubt, they can get it. Now, it does seem to be less severe and less frequent than adults are getting it. Currently, as of the last couple of weeks, the CDC has estimated that kids under the age of 18 represent less than 7% of the actual cases of COVID-19 and less than 0.1% of the actual deaths related to COVID. So it does seem to be less severe and less frequent. Now, that's not to say that kids can't get a severe form of the disease or a severe kind of secondary complication of the disease, but the overall transmission child to child and child to adult seems to be less than adult to adult and adult to child. In other words, the kids don't seem to be the major transmitters of the disease. Second question here, it relates to how safe is in-person schooling? Is it safe for my child to attend school? So in-person schooling, I think at this point can be reasonably safe, and not only reasonably safe, but definitely important. Both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC have come out in favor of schools opening and being open for in-person schooling. Multiple other organizations have said the same, and I think I would agree with that. You can't underestimate the importance that in-person schooling would have with the children and their mental well-being and their emotional well-being, their academic advancement, their social development, physical fitness and nutritional needs, and all these things combined. Now, is the risk going to be zero? Absolutely not, and we have to accept that. It's just not going to be. So, but when you take into account that the kids seem to be less of the transmitters, and you look at this overwhelming amount of positives that can be taken from in-person schooling, I think at that point the benefits do outweigh the risks for most. Okay, there are going to be certain circumstances where there may be a child that has a complex medical condition or a developmental issue that would put them at more risk to not only contract COVID, but maybe be at more risk for severe disease. And in that situation, it might be better for virtual or remote learning. And that's going to be a decision that has to be made, with the family unit and under the direction of their healthcare provider. So it's not going to be for everyone, but for the vast majority, due to the benefits and the lower transmission, I think it can be reasonably safe. And I know that the schools are working hard with the local and state health departments to make sure that there's many safety measures in place and doing the best they can with that. The final question I was going to address here today is whether or not an elementary student really needs to wear a mask, or if they are wearing a mask, do they have to wear it while they're sitting at their desk? Wearing masks is essential for all students that are attending school, in-person schooling. We know that wearing masks, mask wearing, and social distancing are proven at this point to mitigate the spread of the disease. We just know that. So whether or not they're sitting at the desk or moving around, anytime they're going to be inside the building, it's going to be imperative that they wear the mask. If you think about, as opposed to being out here where there's better ventilation, you're indoors, you're more enclosed, those droplets are going to stay in the air more easy. And so it's going to be very important that they wear the mask. Plus, there's probably going to be a strong possibility that that may decrease the risk of other respiratory viruses and flu as we go forward. So ultimately, we're all pioneers on this, and this book is still being written. These chapters we're writing here, so we don't know exactly what will happen when the kids go back to school, but we can reasonably probably open and go from there. That's the power of science and evidence-based medicine, that we will adapt as needed and look at the different protocols as they need changed. So I think that we can make it happen, and I hope that this has answered some of your questions here today. Here at Prince of Peace, we stand together in spirit by keeping safety first.
Hi there, my name's Amy Voelker, and I am an Olathe pediatrician. I've been a member of Prince of Peace since the beginning, way back when it was St. Tomahawk. I've grown up here, and I'm now raising my two daughters here. I just wanted to address today the reasons why we need to wear masks in church. There's been a lot of questions about why, if we're 6 feet apart, do we need to wear masks in church? And the reason why is mostly because an inside space is inherently risky right now. When all of us are inside, we are at the mercy of the air circulation around us, and if we're all breathing and talking and even singing during Mass, then we put ourselves and everybody else at risk just by being in an inside space. I wanted to kind of go over the way to properly wear a mask because I've noticed that there's a lot of confusion about this. So I wanted to just give a little demonstration. You should pretty much always hold your mask by the strings or the ties as much as possible. The inside, if you wear it, becomes contaminated by you, and you should assume that the outside is contaminated by everything around you. So you pretty much always want to hold your mask by the strings. And you want to just slide it over your ear, and then as carefully as you can, slide it over the other ear. And it should fit tightly enough that you do not have to adjust it. If you're constantly pulling it up or pulling it down or readjusting it, then you are contaminating the mask, you're contaminating your hands, and it just becomes very frustrating. And the tighter it fits, especially if you have a wire piece over your nose, it'll keep your glasses from fogging up as well. And you should always use hand sanitizer as much as possible before putting your mask on, and then anytime you touch or readjust your mask or take it back off again. And the mask needs to cover both your nose and your mouth, because if it does not cover your nose, then you are potentially exposing yourself and everybody else to virus. The coronavirus starts in the nose in most people. There is a reason why that when you get tested for coronavirus, the test comes from your nose. It is because that is where the most virus exists in your body, at least in the initial stages, often before you even know you have it. So if you do not cover your nose and you are breathing, then you are sharing your virus with everybody else. And if you potentially don't have the virus, but you don't have your nose covered, and you're in an inside space where everybody else does not have their noses covered, then you could contaminate yourself and become infected. Just wanted to go over those things because I know it's been frustrating in masks, but it is very important to wear your mask over your nose and mouth throughout the mass and inside the church. Here at Prince of Peace, we stand together in spirit by keeping safety first.
Hi, I'm Jamie Wagner. I'm a breast surgical oncologist, and I have been a parishioner at Prince of Peace for 7 years. My husband and I have 2 boys that attend Prince of Peace School, and we are active members with cantoring and lecturing in the parish. Today we wanted to talk about a little of the safety measures that are being recommended and how we feel strongly that they should be adopted within our parish. We often ask, well, why 6 feet? Well, that's because 6 feet is the average distance that a droplet will, from a sneeze or a cough, will travel before landing on a surface, or no longer likely that somebody around you will inhale it. But this should not be done alone. Social distancing really needs to be done in combination with the other safety measures. One of the most important is wearing a mask. The recommendation is at minimum for it to be a 2-layer cloth mask. In addition, we want to try and not touch our face with unwashed hands, and routinely washing hands for at least 20 seconds. This isn't just within our parish and within our church that we need to practice these safety measures. We also need to do it in our daily lives, especially in our work environments. In any small confined space, masks should be worn, even if you're with the same people that you're working with every day, because everybody goes home and can have different exposures. This isn't just within small office spaces, but within stairwells, and you can often use about 6 steps between the person ahead of you as a good safe distance. But also when you're passing people in halls, you never know who may have been in that hall ahead of you. So mask wearing in that setting is also very important. Here at Prince of Peace, we stand together in spirit and in keeping safety first.
I'm German Berbel. I'm a parishioner here at Prince of Peace. Have been here for 7 years. My wife and I are involved in that. She's in the choir. I'm one of the Eucharistic ministers and a lector as well. And both our boys go to Prince of Peace Elementary School. So when we were asked as physicians to, address the parish, I felt very honored. I feel very lucky to be at this parish. It's taken us in, and so because of that, I felt very honored and proud to be able to at least bring some of my ideas about COVID to you. I'm a general surgeon, been in practice 22 years, which saying that makes me realize the number of years that I've been in practice. And although not directly taking care of COVID patients, it does affect what I do. we put out through you guys a series of questions, and there's several of us that are answering those. And so what I was asked to talk about and kind of answer was from a patient's perspective, and then from a hospital's perspective, what this is doing. So we get a lot of patients, I get them in the clinic all the time, that tell me, well, I'm not worried about it. You look at all the football players, the baseball players, they're healthy, they've got it. In fact, this morning, St. Louis Cardinals, 4 came up positive. Baseball players, they've been playing, they've been practicing, they don't feel anything. I'm not worried about this. And by and far, that's true. It's not been something that, when it comes to symptoms, has been out of the ordinary. But that's what's the scary part about this, because at this point we're playing Russian roulette, because we really don't know who's going to be the one that gets hit the worst. So you're healthy, great. But if you have asthma, if you have COPD, if you smoke, if you have diabetes, if you have heart trouble, lung trouble, okay, or if you have cancer or have had cancer, those are the people that all of a sudden odds change. And if you are COVID positive with one of those conditions, now your risk of having what we in surgery call a bad outcome significantly increases. Okay, you're healthy, you don't have any of those. What about your wife? Does she have COPD? Does she have diabetes? Is she on oxygen at home? Any of those. You may be fine, but now you're putting her at higher risk. What about your children? Okay, yeah, you're healthy, your wife's healthy. Do any of your kids have asthma? Have any of your kids had the croup or RSV as an infant? Okay. Does one of your kids have juvenile diabetes? Again, you're fine, but what about your kids? And the symptoms and the effects of COVID on children are still trying to figure that one out. And we're kind of getting an idea for adults, but kids is a totally different story, so we really don't even have a good handle on that. Okay? Well, no, you, wife, kids are all healthy. What about grandma, grandpa? Are they healthy? Okay? Let's face it, the elderly population is our at highest risk population. So you guys are fine, you're gonna go visit Nanny and Papa, and all of a sudden Nanny and Papa are in the hospital. Okay? What about your friends? Uncle Joe, the neighbor, okay? Do they have cancer? Are they getting treated for cancer? Are they on supplemental O2 at home because their asthma is so bad? Do they have COPD? Are they on insulin for their diabetes? Are you gonna be the one that brings COVID and mixes it into that situation for them? Are you gonna be the one responsible for putting them in the hospital? Okay? So those people, everyone you come in contact with are at risk. Lady at the grocery store, you don't want to wear your mask, but you don't know who's next to you in the grocery store. She just may have been stopping by the grocery store after getting her chemo treatment, or coming from the hospital where she just got discharged with pneumonia. You don't know that, but now you're the one that's going to land her in the hospital. So we're trying to make sure that we understand that it's not just about us. It's about everybody that we come in contact with. And by that I mean seriously, this close of a conversation is enough to kind of transmit this disease. And analogy, the flu. It's like a bad flu. Yeah, it is like a bad flu. It's the worst flu we've ever seen, okay? So when you have the flu, do you go out to the store and mix with people? Do you go visit Nanny and Papa when you have the flu? No, because you don't want to give them the flu. The problem with this is that we don't know we have it. So we have to be able to not give it to somebody. And that's where the rub is. So now let's look at the other side. Let's look at the hospitals. Hey, we're fine. I get an email every day. So KU, I work at KU at the main hospital. So email Friday tells me, give me just a second here, sorry, thought I had this one ready. So as of Friday at KU, we have 32 positive inpatients, COVID positive inpatients in the hospital, and 35 inpatients to rule out COVID. So that's 67 patients, okay? 67 beds. KU 660 beds. Oh, wow, that's a huge hospital, 67 beds, that's only 10%. Yeah, it's only 10%. Those 67 beds are not available now. Those are gone from our ability. The other email I get every day is from the leadership of KU telling me that right now, where'd it go? I get a lot of emails, I apologize for this. So we have in the emergency room 54 patients, 33 of which need admissions. We have 150 surgeries scheduled, of which 48 have, as part of the surgery, admission. Okay, so now we're at the point where we have known 72 admissions that we don't have beds for, of which 67 of them were COVID patients. So the point being is that the hospital is full. And we run on a margin to try to make sure that there's always open beds. But right now, we're not getting to do that, because the more COVID patients come in for us to rule out, the more we're having to take care of, the less we can take care of when you come in for your heart attack, for your car wreck, for your acute appendicitis, for your pneumonia, okay? If you're a patient that is brittle already because of whatever condition you have, and you think that I'm gonna go to the hospital and be able to get admitted, no, it's not happening, okay? Analogy, here you go. We're not Christ on the mound with the loaves and the breads, okay? We have limited resources when it comes to ability to take care of patients in an institution. So yeah, it not be that we're running out of ventilators for COVID patients, we're running out of beds, okay? So the more COVID we have, the less not only are we able to take care of COVID patients, but the less we're also able to take care of regular patients, okay? One of the members in my department came COVID positive. He feels great. He had 16 scheduled surgeries that week. Guess what? Those get canceled. Who picks those up? I pick those up. Now I can't take care of my own patients because I'm also taking care of his patients. So now where am I going to find the room to be able to do these patients in an already crowded OR schedule, because I can't put them in the hospital afterwards? It's a trickle-down effect. So is COVID serious? It's serious from a medical issue. If you catch it, it can kill you. And it's Russian roulette as to whether you're gonna be one of those guys that don't feel it or end up on the ventilator. And it's also serious from the effects it's having on every other disease process that we have to take care of. Because now we're taking resources, because the nurses also that are taking care of those COVID patients, those are the same nurses that I need on my floor to take care of my patients after surgery. So we're moving them out of there, and there's not an endless supply of nurses. There's not an endless supply of physician assistants. There's not an endless supply of orderlies. All that is being affected by the more COVID patients we have. So I hope this kind of answers some questions outside of the direct COVID issues. I know some of the other physicians that are members of this congregation are going to address some of those. If you know me, you know I'm pretty straightforward. If you have questions, you can always stop me. We're usually at 9 o'clock Mass on Sundays, just because my wife sings in the choir, and that's kind of how it works out for us. But stop me and ask me questions. I don't have a problem with that, no. And I want to end by saying that here at Prince of Peace, we stand together in spirit, and this is a very strong faith community. And we stand together in spirit by keeping everybody safe, by thinking about safety first. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jake Riggle. I'm a Pulmonary Critical Care Fellow at KUMC. My wife and I and our 3 daughters are fairly new parishioners here at Prince of Peace. We just moved here a little over a year ago. I was asked to answer some questions from some of the parishioners regarding COVID and in particular, the testing for the disease. The first question that I had here is, how accurate is the COVID test, and how many false results do we believe it provides? So that's a loaded question. There's a lot of different tests provided by different manufacturers. The vast majority of what we use right now are called PCR tests, and these are extremely accurate. I would say the chance of having a false positive test for these is very, very low. Basically, if you get a positive test on the PCR testing, that means you have the disease currently. The risk of a false negative test, meaning you get the test and it comes back negative but you still have the disease, is a possibility, although not very common. That would happen if you were just recently infected and you don't have a lot of virus in your nasal cavity, or if you have been getting over the disease and you again don't have as much virus in the nasal cavity at that point. That being said, there are a couple other different types of tests out there. The PCR ones are by far the most used, and they are very good tests. We don't have a lot of good data on them yet because all of the tests that we use have been approved by the FDA under an emergency use authorization, which means we just don't have the studies backing them up yet. I was also asked how accurate are the saliva tests or the spit tests, because these are becoming more common now. These are actually the same types of tests as the nasal swabs. They are PCR tests that are very accurate. The only downside to them is that we tend not to have as much of the virus in our saliva and our spit as we do actually in the nasal cavity and the mucus that you get on the nasal swab. So you are a little more likely to get a false negative with the spit test or with the saliva test. But still a very good test, and if it comes back with a positive result, you do have the virus. Other tests that have been in the news are the antibody tests. That's a blood test, and these are also very good tests, similar style of testing, but what these tell you is whether or not you have been exposed to the disease. So if your antibody test comes back positive, it means you at some point did have COVID. It is not a test to show that you currently have it. A lot of people, if they have positive antibodies, it means they've been exposed, and a lot of them have gone on to donate plasma to help actually treat actively infected patients. Let's see. How close do we think we are to a vaccine? This is in the news quite a bit right now, and there's a lot of work being done on that by a lot of companies. There's a lot of promising results on this. The challenge is that the actual testing and production of any kind of vaccine takes a long time. You need to study first that this vaccine is safe in patients, which so far it seems to be the case, but then you need to study that it's actually effective. And that takes a while, and it takes a lot of people to test on. And so we're not quite to that point yet. After that point, then they start manufacturing it, and that takes a long time. I would be very surprised if we get a vaccine out before the end of this calendar year. Believe me, we're all looking forward to having that because we'd love to have some immunity in the community and not have to wear our masks all the time, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon. The last question that I have here is, are there indications that the coronavirus is weakening over time? And that's an excellent question because it's another yes or no question, or yes and no question. There's a lot of strains of the coronavirus, of COVID-19, in the world right now. And this is because just like any virus, any respiratory virus in particular, these viruses mutate as time goes on and as they're passed from person to person. The first strain of COVID-19 that got into the United States was very, very deadly. And it spread rapidly, mostly because we didn't have any kind of immunity to it. Since then, the predominant strain is much more infectious, so it spreads more rapidly between patients and between people in the community, but it's not quite as deadly. That doesn't mean that this disease is not severe. And in particular, it's very severe to anybody that's got any kind of respiratory disease, asthma, COPD, or even things just as such as obesity or diabetes. As I mentioned, I work in the ICU. I work in pulmonary, so in lung diseases, and so we see these patients in the hospital a lot. You know, I've found people, run into people in the community that were diagnosed with COVID and they felt no symptoms, so they were just maybe having a fever or chills, didn't feel that bad at all. But the people I see in the hospital right now, they get sick very fast. We have patients on the ventilators often. We have patients that unfortunately the disease affects more than just the lungs. It affects their kidneys, it affects their heart. It causes strokes and causes blood clots. So these patients aren't just on ventilators, they're on dialysis machines, they're on medications to bump their blood pressures up. A lot of them have a lot of mental issues coming out of if they survive and get out of the hospital, they'll have PTSD. They actually have problems with just processing thoughts and concentration. It's a very severe illness when people are symptomatic. We've seen patients from all walks in the hospital, in our hospital, all races. We've seen it spread like crazy, whether it's through workplaces, whether it's through just places that you stay. I've had patients in the ICU that are family members that spread through their household, and they would be in rooms that were right next to each other, which is extremely hard to take care of multiple generations of the same family. We've had multiple patients that were in the same church that actually did contract the disease from church. And so this is definitely something that we need to be aware of and we need to be cognizant of when we're in a place that we're gathering together. I think it's important to gather together for family events to worship, but we need to do it smart. We need to wear masks. We need to keep our distance to be able to do this safely so that in the future we can do this and we can all be here to do this together. And really, I think that's the best I can say right now is, while a lot of the people that we see that, you might not have issues with this, the problem is you might spread it to somebody who will, and who will wind up seeing me in the hospital. And, it's very devastating to be very sick in the hospital and not be able to see your family, to be there for weeks. And even then, maybe going to a nursing facility to recover. And even then, going home and being very debilitated. So, I would urge everybody to listen to what our CDC, the WHO, the guidelines out there are saying to protect yourself and to protect others, more importantly.